Now hear this, South Africa is one of the most developed economies on the African continent. It's one of the richest countries in Africa, bearing in mind the kind of natural resources that they have in that country. Yet, Black people in South Africa remain the poorest people in their own country. Majority of the land, 70% of the land, agricultural land in South Africa is owned by whites, yet whites only form 10% of the population. 90% of the South African population is Black people, yet they only own 30% of the agricultural land in their own country. And Julius Malema says it is time to reclaim back the land and give it back to their rightful owners.
We want the land, and that land must be taken from the white minority rule and be given to all the people of South Africa, and that land shall be returned into the hands of the rightful owners.
Hello there, how are you doing? Welcome to another episode of our conversations. My name is Ondiro Oganga. I'm a business journalist by profession and a digital content creator. I love coming on here, having conversations with you guys about Africa, Black people empowerment, and how we can rise up and take our rightful place at the global stage. Today, I want us to talk about the EFF convention that Julius Malema held most recently, and it was one of the most successful political rallies on the continent. It was well attended. They had a great guest line. They had fantastic speakers, and they also had good entertainment. But some of the things that Julius Malema spoke about during the convention stood out for me. One of the things that he spoke about was obviously Russia, Putin, and BRICS. We know that Putin has made it very clear that he will not be going to South Africa for the BRICS summit. And this is because of the pressure that has been mounted by South Africa by the international community to arrest Putin should he set foot in that country. And South Africa is sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place because you want to have good relations with Russia and foster it to see what it can become. But also you cannot be ignorant to the power of the West. When they descend on you, they can crush you within minutes, you know. Just sanctions and revoking travel and stopping doing business with you can crumble your economy within months. You know, we've seen this with very many countries. Zimbabwe is one of them. So South Africa doesn't want to be a victim of circumstances that it has nothing to do with. And that's why it was very hesitant to assure President Putin that he was not going to be arrested should he land in South Africa. And so President Putin opted not to go, and instead he will send government dignitaries. And Julius Malema is not happy about this. In fact, he's saying it was the cowardice of President Cyril Ramaphosa, and that's why he cannot stand up to the West. And it's time that Africans and all other world leaders stand up against the West. And in solidarity with Putin, all leaders should say they're not going to BRICS and should send other people to represent them, to show the West that if you touch one of us, you've touched all of us.
Comrades, we want peace in Ethiopia. We want peace in the DRC. Comrades, we want to make sure that BRICS is strengthened, and BRICS is an alternative to Europe and America. We are with President Putin, and we want to say to President Putin, it is not us South Africans who refused you from coming into the country. It is Ramaphosa, the coward Ramaphosa, who could not guarantee that we will not arrest Putin. We are Putin, and Putin is us, and we will never support imperialism against President Putin. Comrades, America is threatening us with African Growth and Opportunity Act that if we don't arrest Putin, they are going to take away AGOA. They can take away AGOA and leave us with our sovereignty and leave us with our foreign policy. We must have the capacity to take a decision of our own. We call on the President of the People's Republic of China, India, and Brazil not to come to BRICS summit in solidarity with President Putin. They must say, you touch one of us, you touch all of us.
Another thing that Julius Malema also speaks very passionately about is the double standard, particularly when it comes to doing business and ethical business. Climate change is nothing new, and it's not a foreign conversation on the continent. Africa is the least emitter on the continent, yet it suffers the most repercussion from climate change. Droughts affect us severely here on the continent. Flooding affects us here on the continent. Food security has become an issue because majority of African households depend on rain-fed agriculture to survive. Most of Africans' households are farmers. And so the change in climate and weather patterns has affected the production output from agriculture, and that is increasing poverty levels because there is now a threat to food security. Yet, Africans are almost made to pay again the price for being the least emitters. South Africa heavily depends on coal to create energy, and this coal is bought by some of these Western countries to use it to generate power in their own countries. But when it comes to South Africa, then there's double standard. South Africa is almost being forced to quickly transition to clean energy, but it doesn't work like that. We understand that there's climate justice, and Julius Malema says, yes, there's a need to transition, but it should be a just transition. It shouldn't be at the expense of South Africans. Already South Africa is struggling with power. And so when you're asking us to just shut down our coal plants and go green, you will put a strain on an already strained energy system.
They've made us fools. They gave us stage 6 and stage 8. We were living in darkness. The jobs were threatened. The electricity undermined the quality of life in South Africa. From there, from stage 8, they dropped us to stage 3. When they put us on stage 3, we behave like stage 3 is acceptable. That's mediocrity. We don't want load shedding in South Africa. We want a reliable electricity in South Africa. We want electricity that will be supplied to hospitals uninterrupted, to schools uninterrupted, to business uninterrupted. Only the EFF can protect the provision of electricity. Why? We are not opposed to just transition, but we are not going to close our coal power stations until just transition produce equivalent megawatts to the same power station you want us to close. We are not going to sell our coal to anyone. If you say we can't use coal, why do you take it and use it in your countries? No one must take coal from South Africa if they can't allow us to use coal.
And while he was still talking tough, Malema also says that should he win the presidential election, he is going to leave the Commonwealth. Now, this is not something new. It's something that Malema has spoken about. And I mean, many African countries are beginning to question the importance or the value that being in some of these organizations add. I mean, yeah, what value do you get identifying as a Francophone country outside of the fact that you still use French as your national language? Your money is kept by the French Central Bank, and France invests that money at its own discretion. And for you to get back your money, they give it back to you as a loan. What do you get from having relationships with France when your military is tied to theirs and they can invade you anytime they want? Your natural resources belong to France, and whatever residue is left is what they can give to you. What benefit does it get? What benefit does South Africa get from being part of the Commonwealth outside of the fact that they were all colonized by Britain? What value does the Commonwealth add to the table? And so I do not think that South Africa will leave the Commonwealth, but I think he's starting a very important conversation of what kind of relationships do former colonies want with their colonizers moving forward in a post-colonial era.
We need to be loyal to the discipline of our organization. Comrades, we must refuse to be part of the Commonwealth. There is nothing common about the Commonwealth except that we're all colonized by Britain. as a revolutionary party that is going to take over South Africa next year, we are going to leave the Commonwealth. We will not be dictated by IMF, will not be dictated by the World Bank, will be dictated to by the people of South Africa. We want to say to Commandant Fidel Castro that we stand with the Cubans and they remain an anchor of our struggle for socialism across the world. We need peace and to silence the guns in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Sudan. We need to openly, as a glorious movement, say that another African must never enjoy seeing a blood of another.
One last thing that Malema spoke about that has been interpreted in very many ways is the land issue. Land is a very touchy subject in South Africa because 70% of agricultural land in South Africa is owned by whites, yet 90% of the people in South Africa are black. This perpetuates poverty because agricultural land is responsible for production. So if you cannot produce your own food to consume at household level, if you cannot produce your own food that you can sell and make money, then, what then happens to you? Land is a very integral part of Africa because land is what unlocks opportunities for you. You can sell land and make some money. You can use land as collateral. You can use your land for business. And so Julius Malema says Black South Africans have been shortchanged in their own country, and it's time to reclaim back their country and take back their power.
We want the land, and that land must be taken from the white minority rule and be given to all the people of South Africa, and that land shall be returned into the hands of the rightful owners.
Well, that's all I had for you this episode of our conversations. My name is Ondiro Oganga. Let me know what you think about what Julius Malema said, and I'll see you again next time.